And I relied heavily on collaborative troubleshooting, which I feel like I used a lot this year. So to start with the building confidence in all students, something I really focused on was pointing out what they did right, no matter how small it was. It doesn't matter if it was a complex problem or a hard problem, or something like solving quadratics, and all I could get out of them was they added something correctly. I did that. I found the smallest thing I could that they did right if I really had to reach for it. I didn't point out their mistakes myself. Of course, I started doing that when I started this, but I really worked towards having them discover it themselves. I just really think it helps them understand better, and they're less likely to give up if they find their own mistake versus if I point them out, because that can be pretty defeating. Facilitating the conversation instead of dominating it. So when they would ask me for help or ask me if they got something right, I really focused on making it a conversation between the two of us instead of me just telling them what they did wrong and how to fix it. Reassuring them that it's okay to not know what to do, and then have them work on something that looks familiar to them. So I told them, if you see this long problem and you have no idea what to do, just find one thing that you think you can work with. Even if you're not sure if you're doing it right, just find something that looks familiar to you to start with. Reminding them that trying and getting it wrong is still getting them closer to not trying at all. That was something really big this year, as I told them, don't leave your paper blank. I would rather you try something and get it wrong than to not try anything at all. And then building relationships with the students and letting them know that I'm proud of them and that algebra is really hard. I think I have done pretty great with building relationships my last few years of teaching, but something I didn't do a lot was specifically use the words like I'm proud of them. For some reason, that just doesn't flow off of my tongue quite as naturally. So I really pushed myself to be, I don't know why it felt uncomfortable, but it kind of did, to just tell them flat out, I'm proud of you for doing that. And I can't believe how big of a difference it makes when you tell a kid that you're proud of them. They got really happy. So that was really helpful. So here's an example I have. Sorry, it's kind of blurry. This is a solving equations. So a kid asked me to come over. He didn't quite get an answer yet, but he knew he did it wrong. So I took a second and just kind of looked at it, which kind of makes him nervous when I'm silent for a second, but I tell him, just let me look at it for a second. So I found something I could praise him for, and I said, hey, you knew to combine your like terms. You knew that 7x was supposed to go with the 18x because x's are supposed to go together. That's great. And then something else I praised him for was the fact that he knew, because a lot of my kids will just add the x's together that they see. And I said, you did great. That was a negative 7x, and you knew to flip it into a positive to move it to the other side. And then another one. So even though he wasn't supposed to add that 10 you see in the second line, I still told him that's great that you knew you were supposed to move the 10 to the other side. You knew that was supposed to happen eventually. And then the last thing I praised him for, which I think was the most important, is he knew that he didn't do something right. He got to the end. He obviously doesn't have an answer yet, but he knew something was wrong. So that's the thing I mainly focused on praising him for, that it was good that he at least knew something happened. So then when I asked him how he knew he got it wrong or how he knew he made a mistake, he said, well, at the end, there's usually only one number next to the x that you're supposed to divide by. So that to me was a great point. Again, you knew you got it wrong. You knew there's only supposed to be one number next to the x. So then we kind of looked at it like that 25 next to the x probably would have looked normal to him. And I asked him what was standing out, and we kind of figured out together that 1.5 was kind of in a weird spot, which means that was our mistake. And then normally something I probably would have done in the past was to tell him right away, hey, you should have multiplied that 1.5 at the very beginning. But I just kind of let him wander with it. And I asked him, what do the parentheses mean at the end? And he told me, okay, parentheses mean you're supposed to multiply. And then I asked him, do you think the 25 is the only thing you were supposed to multiply it by? And then he went back a line and said, no, you probably should have done it to the 10 first. And then I kind of had to push him a little bit, but we were able to work back to, I was supposed to multiply by the 1.5 at the beginning. So again, I could have just looked at this problem and told him, yeah, you got that wrong, or hey, you should have done this first. But I pointed out the stuff he did right, praised him for knowing he did something wrong, and then I kind of had a conversation with him about what happened, so we were able to figure it out together. So that's an example of a way I would have used that. And then a lot of the questions they'd always ask me or I guess it's not even really a question, they would just raise their hand and tell me, I don't know what to do. So I really worked on getting them to ask me a specific question. So then it would go to, okay, how do I do this? And I said, no, that's not a specific question. If you want my help, you need to ask me for something very specific. And that took a lot of work and training for my kids because they just wanted to ask me, how do I do this? So I kind of worked on them with asking me a specific question. Are you stuck on a specific part of it? And then with the kids that just really didn't know how to start, I got them to finally start asking me, how do I start this? Or I don't know how to start that. Because at least now I know they truly just need help starting the problem. Or if they just need help with something specific, I don't want to waste my time helping them with something they don't need. So having them ask me a specific question. And then I also try teaching them how they can't just rely on me as soon as they get a question and wait for me to get an answer, because they'll sit there and raise their hand and they'll wait for me because I'm helping somebody else, and then they waste a bunch of time. So getting them to build their confidence and just trying something before they get to me. Usually by the time I get to them, they have their problem figured out already. So overall, I feel like from beginning of the year versus when I started this towards the end of the year, I got a lot of increase in participation. Kids were more willing to try. They were more willing to make mistakes, which means I got less blank papers because I was actually having them try something. Higher test scores, of course, that could have had other things to do with it, but I did notice that once I started doing this, my test score started going up. Better attitude, the kids, instead of just giving up or getting mad at the problem, they really opened up to trying the problems and not getting as frustrated as they did at the beginning of the year. They felt more confident. They finally started asking me good questions. I hardly ever get anyone now that just tells me they don't know what to do. They usually have a specific questions. And of course, hopefully higher STAR scores, but that is to be determined.